Good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us. We might wait for just a couple more moments as we are waiting for all of our participants to join, but we'll be starting very shortly. So thank you everyone for your patience. We'll be with you in just a moment. Good evening again for those that have just joined us. We're just going to take a couple more moments. We're expecting just over 100 people to join us tonight, so we're about halfway there on our participant numbers at the moment. So we might just wait another minute or two just to let the remaining people join so that they hear through all of tonight's webinar. Thanks, Janine, for posing the first question of the chat tonight. Yes, most people on the chat will be on mute, but we will be able to open up for some conversation later this evening. We're slowly having a few more people join. I'll just give it one more minute and then we'll kick off. Thank you everyone for your patience. Okay, well, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining us. Our numbers will likely continue to rise over the next few minutes, but we'll just do a brief introduction. My name's Thomas Kramer. I'm the General Manager of Residential Care with Montefiore. It's my great pleasure to welcome you tonight to the second of our Spotlight series, Decision Time, Choosing Residential Care for Yourself and for your family. Before we move into today's webinar, I really would like to take a moment to recognise the passing. Good evening, Kim. I'd like to take the opportunity to recognise the passing of a truly great man, Eddie Jacku. He passed away this morning, and that's a great loss to our community. It's a great loss to Montefiore. Eddie was an incredible gentleman. He was an inspiration to many people. His works have inspired others to do great things. And I must say, he was an inspiration to me. I was having a conversation with him in the last week in which he spoke about all of us should be holding our wealth inside us and spending it with our friends and with our family and not be looking outside. And I think it's a great message from a truly great man. We wish his family long life. Our thoughts are with his wife and with his sons. And I just wanted to acknowledge him today. Montefiore Spotlight Series. The series is, at this point, all on webinars because of the pandemic, and it explores aspects of ageing, focusing on health and wellness, around research and innovation, and importantly, why we're joining tonight, around decision-making, and hopefully being able to provide you with some additional thoughts on how to make decisions regarding care, and importantly on how to make great decisions regarding care for the future. Tonight, we'll be joined by Lisa and Renée, two of Montefiore's board members, both of whom have significant board experience with Montefiore. Importantly, they have significant professional experience that's relevant to us, and more recently have also had personal experiences around aged care with Montefiore. Tonight, in conversation with them, we're going to discuss how decisions are made around accessing care. What are the factors that actually make good decisions? What are the things that you should know about when accessing care? And importantly, how those decisions can enable us all to work together to support the person that's receiving care the best, but also those that are loved by them and their family. It's our hope today that by the end of today's session, you'll be able to have greater clarity around the decisions that you may need to make in accessing care, and also around how to understand the factors. But importantly, at the end of it, also being able to understand that there's trusted professionals like us here at Montefiore that can support you to understand different types of care and how to best access them in a timely way. Before I invite Renée and Lisa into conversation tonight to talk about decision making and their personal experiences with it, I thought I would share some information around care in general, because it can be quite a complicated process for people to understand, and certainly understanding the different types of care that are available out there can be a challenge, particularly when you're at a moment of stress. In essence, all aged care services, well, the vast majority of aged care services in Australia are funded by the Commonwealth Government. And they broadly fall under three pillars: the Commonwealth Home Support Program, home care packages, and then finally residential care. If you think of those three as a tiered approach, the Commonwealth Home Support Program services are what we would see as our basic level of service. Sometimes they're people getting organised care to come into a home to support with domestic assistance. Other times it can be things like the Burgess Centre, where people can come and access a day service to support their emotional wellbeing and keep them connected with community. Home care packages are at the next level of care, really, in this tiered approach, and home care packages can provide a reasonable amount of care into the home. That would depend on the level of packages, and it's also accessed via the aged care assessment team and an approval process. Finally, residential care in this space, also accessed by the aged care assessment team, is what we're focusing on tonight about accessing, but it's important to understand the continuum of care and how we move through it, and how Montefiore can support people through all aspects of that continuum of care. One of the other aspects of care, which is not tonight's focus, is private services. And they're not regulated in the same way that Commonwealth funded aged care services are. The Commonwealth Government essentially regulates the quality of services of all of their funded types of care. And that's a really welcome thing for Montefiore. We have an incredible track record of excelling at all of our assessment contacts. And that enables us to demonstrate that what we provide is of the highest quality. It can be a little bit of a convoluted process, and sometimes it can be a challenge to remember all the different steps. One of the things that we'll be doing today is, for all the people that have registered, we will send out the step-by-step guide to all the people that have registered today on how to access care, and in particular residential care. Before we also hop into our conversation with Renée and with Lisa, I think it's worth acknowledging that over the last few years, residential care and aged care more broadly have had a pretty bad rap in the media. There's been quite a number of stories run around services that were not providing great care. There's obviously been the release of the Royal Commission and the recommendations that have come out of the Royal Commission as well. And I think it's important to acknowledge that all of those media reports, the reports that have come from the Royal Commission, have impacted people's decisions around accessing care. It's placed an additional burden or placed an additional anxiety around people making their mind up as to whether it's the right choice. Is it going to be a safe choice for their loved one to come into care? And so I thought tonight, one of the best things that I'm hoping people will be able to take out from this is that actually there's some fantastic services out there, and Montefiore is one of the top tier leaders in Australia. It's the most awarded provider of residential care by actually the regulator, by the Commission in Australia. And there's some really good things that you can take away to determine how you can make a great choice in accessing care. One of the things that often is an impact is people's emotions around entering care. There's a feeling that they could be abandoning a person. Often there's a guilt associated with someone coming into care. And one of the things that I wanted to dispel today is that, that it's a bad choice. In fact, I think placing someone into care can be a fantastic choice, and it enables relationships to return to a much more normal level for people. It enables a husband to be a husband or a wife to be a wife, because the burden of physically caring for a person is then taken over by trained and empathetic staff that can take on that. And the staff enter into partnership with the resident, with the person receiving care, but also with the family. And in that partnership, we can continue to have a meaningful contribution from family into a person's care, and at the same time enable them to return to what their normal relationship would have been in a vast way. I think one of the other things, and a common thought around entering care, is that it's often seen as the end of the road. It's a place where people come to pass away. And in my experience, actually, what I would say is that entering residential care enables people to be connected with peers, with people that they can associate with. It enables them to reconnect with community. And via accessing great clinical care and regular meals and the right medications at the right time, they're able to socialise and engage with their family and with others in a way that often they haven't been able to before coming into care. Residential care can often enable people to live their best life, and it can be a wonderful thing for people. Lastly, before I introduce Renée and Lisa into our conversation today, I wanted to share some of my experience around joining Montefiore. I joined Monty in November of last year, and I've always known Montefiore to be one of the best providers in Australia. It has an incredible reputation, and it's clearly well deserved. The thing that sets Monty apart is the people. And in fact, I would say the people are the most important thing. And at Monty, there's lots of them. You know, we have double the RNs compared to the industry average. We have 2.5 times the allied health. That's 120 allied health professionals working directly with residents, 2.5 times the industry average. We have 50% more staff in general when you look at our hours than what the industry does. And all of those people, the hours that are here, when you combine them with great clinical governance, when you combine them with the passion that people bring to their job and the supports and the systems that are here, it truly enables fantastic care that is individualised. That does mean that people continue to make choices regarding their care and have direct input into it. And it's been an absolute privilege to work here. Tonight, we have the opportunity to talk with Lisa Spira. She has been a member of the Monty family for the last 20 years, sitting on the board. Lisa is a registered nurse with 40 years experience. She works as a clinical nurse specialist and a clinical nurse educator, and has been a great contributor to many initiatives at Montefiore over the years. More recently, Lisa's father, Henry, came into care at Randwick, and tonight I think we're going to be able to hear from her around what that experience was and the decisions that were made with her and her mother Judy and her brothers. Lisa, good evening.
Thomas, and good evening everybody, and thank you very much for joining this webinar tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And Renée, thank you for joining us as well tonight. Renée is a clinical psychologist. She also holds qualifications in education. Renée has also been a member of the board for about 20 years now, and has been a huge contributor to a number of initiatives, most importantly around the Staff Holocaust Awareness Program, which has been an awarded program by the state government. It's also been recipients of awards from the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, as they're known now. Renée comes to us with 2 experiences personally recently. Most recently, her husband Jeff was in care with us at Randwick, and some time ago, for 8.5 years, her mother was in care at our Hunters Hill campus. Renée, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. It's wonderful to be here and to be able to speak to the audience. And I would just like to say how unbelievably saddened I am by Eddie's passing, and that how all the community must be mourning as well.
It is a big loss, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Renée, can you tell us a little bit about Jeff?
Sure. Jeff was a very significant scientist in the Australian and international field, and his passion was his work, and he was quite driven by his work, and his language of expression was very much in the work. And suddenly last November, he had a seizure at home, and instantly there was a very significant diagnosis and possibly terminal, and he really struggled with assuming that diagnosis, as we all did. And it confronted so many issues about who he was. So he was very life-loving. He was very, very caring about family and friends. And suddenly he saw all of that possibly truncated in terms of lifespan. And we had to confront massive issues instantly, within an instant, really.
And so I gather that was the reasons and the circumstances that you and your family had to start considering potential care options for Jeff.
Yeah,
Talk to us about that.
absolutely. Yes, and the care options included the possibility that he would get better, so significant rehabilitation was needed. And also we had to consider end-of-life decisions had to be in the picture as well. So suddenly there was this gamut of possibilities which we had not contemplated the day before or ever, really.
Yeah. And so the big decisions when they come out of the unexpected and out of the blue, aren't they? And, everyone's circumstances there is quite individual, I suppose.
Extremely individual, and it very much highlights how when we take in new residents at Monty, and when all these things come into play, that it is very much a one-by-one experience, because each family comes with a different set of issues and different concerns, and if you like, a different culture. And we come into a new culture called aged care, and that is extremely confronting.
It can be certainly, it's a new experience for lots of people, isn't it?
Very, very new and overwhelming and confronting.
It can be, absolutely. Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about your dad, Henry?
So Henry was significantly older than Jeff. So he was 87 years old when he came to the Monty. He was an amazing guy. He was born in Vienna, grew up in New York. So we had that combination of being a European gentleman, but an American larrikin. Married my mum Judy in Australia, had 3 kids, 7 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren, built businesses, traded in crazy products, went to all corners of the earth, took us all with him, but got hit by the dementia stick. Unfortunately, had this diagnosis of Alzheimer's probably 7 years ago.
Right. And
the last 2 were the really trying times for our family. But I will say that my mother is euphemistically known in our family as Cyclone Judy, and she managed him absolutely magnificently. She kept him at home for the last 2 years, single-handedly looking after him with the assistance of Monty Home Care.
Yeah.
But when we realised that he needed more care, we enlisted home care that did a great job, gave her some respite just to attend appointments or go to the supermarket. But then as his care needs became more chronic, and from my experience of knowing how to roster staff and fill sick holes and all the rest of it, I became really concerned that we were not actually going to be able to give Henry all of the care that he required at home.
Yeah.
And when we realised that he was deteriorating to the point that he needed 2 people to care for him, and that my mother was then also requiring care because so often the carer gets overlooked, but she was also a woman in crisis looking after this man. My brothers and mum and I all came to the conclusion that we needed to actually start ramping up the discussion.
The key reasons for you around starting to consider residential care were around 2 staff being needed to support and just rostering issues, or was it just everything was coming at once? And
it was all coming at once,
yeah.
and it was also that as his care needs became more complex, you know, his diet was changing, his swallowing, his speech was deteriorating, he was losing language. You know, he needed to be seen by a speech therapist. He needed a physio to fit in with the appropriate shoes and a walker. He needed nursing care, often 2 of them, possibly 3, to shower him because he was non-compliant or because he, you know, needed daily care issues. It's a lot for one woman in her mid-80s. So we just realised that all of this care was going to be provided under one roof, and it was going to be a much better outcome for him.
There's certainly, it can be really overwhelming, and people hang on and they try and they try and they try, and it's an incredible effort by people, but it's also can be really challenging.
Yeah, which it was, but we had a great experience.
Yeah. And so can you tell me, what were some of the emotions that your mum or your dad or your family felt around the decision that perhaps residential care was the right option for you?
So mum had been a volunteer here in special care for 9 years. So unlike me, she wasn't a registered nurse, but she had loads of dementia-specific experience, which was amazing. But when we came to the point of making that decision, I really knew that we had done everything as a family to keep Dad at home for as long as we possibly could. And I felt that at first I thought, I feel that we're abandoning him, or we're going to neglect him, and we've let him down. But honestly, from day one, the Monty has this ecosystem where absolutely all of these resources work simultaneously, harmoniously, and all of his care needs were all attended to from the moment that he arrived. It was just this huge, even though it was bittersweet, you know, he was no longer that guy that was going to be living at home, that when you visit your parents' home, they're together. But we knew that he was safe, and that gave us enormous reassurance. And we also knew that mum was safe. I mean, I was worried. You know, I'd turn on my phone in the morning. Has there been some crisis overnight? Does something require an intervention? And it wasn't. Mum was able to be safe and secure in her home, visit him, and Dad was really enjoying the benefits of physios and OTs and speech therapists and dietitian and dementia-specifically trained carers, not just registered nurses, but those that were actually specifically trained in dementia care. And even though the emotions were you know, initially a negative, they resolved pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a personal experience, isn't it? I mean, you obviously have the benefit of your professional experience and kind of knowing what all those different, you know, different allied health professions can do, and the nurses and your experience here. But it's you still have that emotion, don't you, attached to it at the beginning?
Yeah, and it's still your dad, you know.
Yeah. Renée, I mean, I imagine you've had a different experience because everyone's unique.
Everyone is terribly unique, of course, which makes the care having to be very, very tailor-made. And what was very heartening for me was the minute that we walked through the front door. And of course, I have an asset in that I am known a little bit around here, that I was welcomed and people said hello. But I see that happen for most families. So from the beginning, there was a sense of welcome and that we were belonging in this particular sense. And very, very quickly, Jeff became known in the home as he went from activity to activity. And as Lisa talked about, those things evolved from obviously very specific care needs very quickly. And that was just so anxiety removing that the care was attended to quickly, and also that there were so many aspects of care that could not be provided at home, because I had very quickly to get full-time care, meaning night nurses and also day carers, which was impossible to maintain, and also to keep Jeff occupied. So yes, care.
It's kind of it's the lifting of the stress of some of that organisation, and that you have that stress and the anxiety that's there around, am I doing the right thing? And you don't want them to go into care, but then when you get into care, you see all the supports that are around, and it enables you to feel kind of a little bit of a burden lifted, and you can see that they're getting.
It's actually a very huge burden that's lifted, because as we've been alluding to all around, the fact that you can see that very quickly, for example, on the physical level, there was hydrotherapy, there was physiotherapy, there was those specific HER machines to move people, there were exercises every morning, where as soon as that started to put in play, it actually initially energized Jeff rather than not knowing what to do, and took him away from the only thing he really focused on, which was the work, which was actually the worst thing for him to focus on. So I could not have put that in place.
Yeah, I mean, Renée, it sounds like your journey and Lisa's are quite different. Lisa, with your dad, it was a long period from the time of his diagnosis through the journey of his care, and Renée, it was quite a short one.
Very short.
From a diagnosis in your perspective. Lisa, how did you anticipate the journey ahead? You had those 7 years.
So I always knew that there was going to come a time when Dad would require more care than what we were giving him at home. And when that time came, and we've been and looked at other aged care providers, yes, I've been on the board for a long time, and I'm passionate about care initiatives and best practice and care outcomes. I didn't want my brothers to think that I was totally Monty-centric, so I dragged them around Sydney eastern suburbs to see some other facilities. And even though they were all very nice and shiny and new and had baby grand pianos, they didn't have the level of care that I think that we really wanted to provide for Dad. And I said to them, just have a look at how many people are walking around here in uniforms, and you'll see. So once we overcame that, that journey began, and I was nervous. I really was. I was nervous. I was anxious. Yes, I'd sat on that board for 20 years. I had sat with Renée and Gary at ops meetings where we really nut out, how we can just constantly self-examine about making things better and better outcomes for residents and better care initiatives needs. And yet to be the recipient of it then as a family, and to see how all of these decisions are implemented. And the Monty is a huge mothership with a lot of moving parts, so many different departments. And just to see how harmoniously that all worked together and how Dad benefited from it, I knew that the journey that we had been on was actually now becoming his journey. And I felt that it was the right one. Yeah.
Renée, as part of your journey, did anyone ever have conversations with you around advanced care planning or around advanced care directives?
I was vaguely informed before Jeff entered Monty that it was a good idea. I was actually advised by a psychiatrist looking after him that it would be important to get him to write down what his thoughts were about what he wanted for himself. Fortuitously, we actually did that at home. But a lot of the professionals found it extremely difficult to indicate end of life, yet implied it. So I was kind of torn about which road I was really on. and which road he was on. And he was quite confused as well. So it's a very different journey, but it was so fast that I really had to always think on my feet. So what I tried to do, which I think is so hard in this journey of any aged care, is anticipate. Because if you don't anticipate the next step, you do fall down in a kind of abyss, and it takes a long time to get a handrail out. So that if I had a question when we came to Monty, I knew I could actually ask the social worker or the head of the unit. I found them particularly helpful in this way. But to be able to anticipate really does save a lot of falls from the carers.
No, and look, I suppose one of the things I thought would be really helpful hint around decision making when it comes to residential care for those that are on the call today would be to talk about the fact that when you're thinking about care for yourself, when you're thinking about care for a loved one, have the conversation with them around what sort of care do they want in the future. Do they want to go to hospital for investigations if something crops up for them clinically? You know, what types of care do they want to receive in the interventions? Because it's great when you can answer them for yourself and tell your family. It also helps lift some of that load from the family making decisions around.
But Thomas, you're assuming that everybody wants to have that conversation.
It is a tough conversation.
That makes it so hard when the person does not. So you've got to somehow work around the denial as well.
Absolutely.
That's a big issue.
It is. Look, it's a huge issue. And in fact, one of the things I certainly know here is that when we try to have conversations with people, some people don't want to have them. And that's completely okay. It's okay not to have the conversation, but it can also be a help, to consider the future and to have that planning conversation with family, decide what types of care you want for yourself, or when a person still has a capacity to talk about what they want, have that conversation with them. It helps guide you as the family member as well, through what can be some tough decisions.
But that's an enormous issue, isn't it? And it also really depends, which I think is what is so special about Monty and the fact of the social workers and what they contribute, is that initially everyone comes from a different culture. Every family is a different culture. Is it one of speaking? Is it one of not speaking so much? Is it, things that go underground? So I think that's where the expertise of the social work team enhances what care is then put in place. And I think that's an essential part of the flow chart.
Can I just jump in for a minute?
Please.
I absolutely agree wholeheartedly with you, Renee, but I see something else, and that is that aging is a process and it's not a straight line. And I think it's really important, if you're going to have a conversation, you need to know what you're having a conversation about, and therefore to really educate yourselves as much as possible about the whole myriad of aged care services that are available. Do you want to go to a daycare centre in the beginning? Do you want to have some home help when you need it? Maybe go in on respite and give it a go. Go to low care, go to high care, go to dementia care, and getting an understanding of what all of those different components are, and then how they relate to the person that you're planning care for. And that's constantly moving too, because the goalposts keep shifting. So it's a multifaceted approach.
It's really a shifting landscape, and you have to be quite good at negotiating it, I think. Don't you?
Completely agree. I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask is, when's the right time to have the conversation around accessing care?
Well, I think it's a really important question, and I've got to go back to with my mother as well, because that was one experience, a bit more like Lisa's and her dad, and also now with Jeff, is that when the primary carer is quite resolved in that of what they can manage and what they can't. And because everything is so new, I think it is a very difficult thing to be able to actually assess. And so to me, the carer really does need a thoughtful place to be able to work this out. Because to be able to say, I have a limit and I can do this, but I can't do that, actually takes a lot of courage, because we are always faces naturally the voice of the other or the judgment. And so you have to be very resolved in yourself, and I think quite strong at times. So that's important to consider as well.
And I mean, it's good to note, isn't it, that the right time and what's strength for one person is going to be different for another, you know, and that doesn't make it right or wrong in any way.
No.
It's what fits for you, and what, you know, you're all trying to get the best result for your loved ones or for yourself. And so every individual circumstance is going to be quite different, isn't it?
So I think that goes back to the know thyself saying, that you do have to take a good hard look at what you can manage, given everything in your own life as well.
And reach out for that professional support so that you can have someone come in.
I think that would be a very good idea.
Yeah. There's a great question, a great comment that's come through on the chat that says the right time, if I can find it, the right time is when the person has capacity to continue the conversation. And look, for some, that's going to be exactly right. And for others, they might have had a health event that's just changed the course of action, you know, the course of the next year's planning for them. So,
and sometimes this situation can change so rapidly that there's no time to have that, you know, and then you're forced at a very low point to be making hasty decisions. I mean, I respect the question. I agree.
Danielle makes a great contribution into this by saying that start the conversation before an unexpected life event occurs. And it is that continuum, isn't it, of making little decisions along the way, and wherever you're comfortable to, having the conversation around what's going to happen for the future. Lisa, can I ask, did accessing care, I mean, you spoke about it a little bit previously, but what was the main things that changed for you and your brothers after accessing care? You spoke about the feeling of safety before.
Very much. Well, first of all, my mother could return to being a wife and not delivering the level of care that was required for my dad, that she was doing pretty much single-handedly. For my brothers and I, it gave us reassurance that both parents were now in a safe place. Dad was being magnificently cared for, and Mum was here all day, every day, and had a huge role, but she still went home to her own home and had that safety and security of her, and for her peace of mind that Dad was here and being looked after. So that I think that security for all of us was the big change.
And Renée, in your experience, was there a thing that stands out as something that changed for you?
It was very, very important. And I ensured that Jeff was in surroundings where both my sons could come and visit. And one son became a dad during this process. So I really wanted him and his wife to feel that they could bring the baby into a calm and safe environment where any care issues could be taken care of, and there wasn't the unknown catastrophe happening, which could have actually happened. And I've got to say, I was so touched by the staff's caring and how they got to know the boys and how they would greet the boys. And if we were here late at night, we would be offered a meal so that they did experience not a trauma of going to a hospital. And also when palliative care was needed, Jeff was not moved to a hospital. So it was still the quiet surroundings, that they were not as disrupted or traumatized really, because neither of them had encountered death in this way, that they were protected. And that was, for that, I'm forever grateful.
No, look, I think touching on what you were saying there around how it's not only just the person receiving care, the resident that often ends up getting supported. It's actually the people that are significant in their lives. It's their family, isn't it? And it's the management of people's emotions through that we have social workers, that we have even the care staff, our AINs, supporting people as well and acknowledging what's occurring can be.
Yes.
That's culture. Thomas, that's the culture of care. That's what we experience consistently across all departments, that there was this absolutely incredible culture of people who genuinely cared, not only for Dad, but for our whole family. It was really an incredible thing to experience.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was going to just invite everyone that's on the call today is we do have some space today in this webinar to answer questions or to engage with dialogue. Because of the number of people that are on the call, I would invite anyone that wants to pose a question. There's a question and answer button on the bottom of your screen where you can type in a question. Shortly, we will start to go through any questions that come through on the Q&A function of this webinar. Unfortunately, because of the volume, we can't give everyone access to their microphones. It becomes a bit of a juggle in my experience with this number of people on, but certainly we would love to hear from you on the chat or in the questions. So if you'd like to start thinking of things to say, we'll be with you shortly to answer that. Renée, can you tell me some of the things, you've been on the board for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Were there things that surprised you, even though you know quite a lot from a governance perspective around Monty, were there things that surprised you as your personal experience of care from here?
Yes, actually, I was quite stunned, really, by when you sit and listen to programs being implemented and policies and toss up whether different things are actually incorporated into the running of the home. It's pretty intellectual. But when you become the recipient of those programs and how they are put in place, that is a very different experience when you feel them emotionally. So when I saw how the different aspects of care were put in place for Jeff, for example, the dementia specialist was there very quickly because he had cognitive loss that looked like dementia. The other aspect of that was because he'd been such a high-level scientist and science was no longer his way of expression, very quickly he was given one-to-one arts lessons, he was given access to the art room anytime, and he was set up in his own room to do his art. And we have the most amazing series of paintings now. And in the art, you can actually see the progression of the thinking and the illness. So the speed and the way at which the occupational therapy, the creative therapies, and the physical therapies came into play was a very amazing experience, rather than just intellectually being, okay, we offer art therapy and we offer physical therapy and we offer music or we offer these other things. And I can't not say that a friend of mine came at the time from Melbourne to visit, and she had a meal with Jeff and a glass of wine, and she could not rave highly enough about the food. So that was an added plus. So how all the things wove in together was it was really heartening to see what we've done over the last 20 years, actually.
It is. It reassures you.
It does, of course.
And Lisa, I suppose the same question to you, with your experience as well on the board, were there things that surprised you coming from there to seeing it as a consumer, as someone experiencing it at a personal level?
Definitely. As Renée says, we sit there and we talk about things that, need to be, added to policy manuals and initiatives and programs for residents and, staff ratio, resident care ratios. And it's only when you're actually on the floor that you do realise that the policy manual belongs in the office and that everybody understands everything in it and how to implement it. And it's just a really, really great experience that we had to see all of these interdisciplinary factors come into play together. Yeah. And the residents and their families who are the recipients of all of this planning.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I'm delighted with is I can actually see that we have some residents that have joined us tonight.
Oh,
And I think that's fantastic. So specifically wanting to say welcome to you and thank you so much for joining. It's great to have you participate in sessions like this as well. And it's also great to see your feedback come through to us in the chat at the moment. So thank you so much for coming on. I do want to also acknowledge Leora Ross has come in here and said that my mother was also in Montefiore Terrace. Apart from the tremendous care and stimulation she received, one aspect that helped mum and made me feel at home was that she could enjoy the familiarity and the joy of being able to celebrate the Jewish festivals in the home. And that's so important, isn't it? That people can come in and continue to be connected with community and continue to be connected with faith and feel as though they're still part of I suppose culture that's been important to them throughout their whole life. David has also on the chat asked for some commentary around the financial side. Look, I think one of the things around finances is that they are incredibly individual. Selling houses or renting out houses to fund care, that's not everyone's experience. And it's certainly, as Montefiore is a charitable provider, we have a large percentage, 40% of our residents actually don't come in requiring finances at all. And we take all people into care. It doesn't matter what their finances are, but it is an individual conversation that people have. And so if anyone would like to know more about that, please reach out to our admissions department. Their contact details will be sent out to all participants today. And what we recommend is that people do go and talk to a financial planner about their own individual circumstances, because it is a very much an individual thing. I can see there's a question that's come on about how many people are on the webinar. At our top, we had, I think, close about 78 or 79 people that joined us tonight, John. And so that's a good number. And there is a recording of this, which I think will at some point be made available to those that would like a copy, but we'll have to see whether or not we can distribute it. Kim has come through on the chat and said the culture of care, it's not just an ethos, it's a practice that she's observed over the past year across the multidisciplinary team, and she can't speak highly enough. Kim, thank you so much for your contribution tonight to the chat here. I am just scrolling back through the chat to see if I've missed a question. There is also a person acknowledging Eddie, and I think it is really fitting that Francine, thank you for mentioning him in the chat. He is an immeasurable loss to the community. And another request for a copy of the recording. For anyone that's online, is there any other questions that you'd like to pose to Renée or to Lisa or myself? Feel free to type on in, and Danielle comes through and she's noting that she's actually placed 10 people with us at Monty, and that she loves the fact that we also take people from a non-Jewish background. And she's noting that one of her beautiful clients has put on weight, which is a great thing for us. It's not often we get to talk about people putting on weight as a good thing in the community, but I can tell you it makes us exceptionally happy when we see people come in and eat heartily. It is such a lovely thing. So thank you, Danielle, for the comment there. Marilyn's also asking around the recording. We will confirm how we can do that in our mail out to all the registered email addresses at the end of today's webinar. Renée, Lisa, is there anything that you would like to add into today's conversation? Anything that you would like to share further beyond the conversation we've already had?
I think I would like to add that the ability to stay very closely in the process with Jeff in terms of the emotion in his illness and in the later life was only enabled because I did not have to always be chasing care issues or medicines or doctors or making calls, then I actually could have some of my head free to think about the emotion of what the family needed and to keep that as much in a context or together. But in the beginning, I was only running to keep up with all those side issues that were not my forte. So I think for anyone also without this experience, it is important to know that what is decreased by entrance to Monty when needed is that a lot of the anxiety can be taken from you. And that lightens the burden, and that relationships can be enhanced and repaired when you're not fighting daily care battles. And I think that is important to know, because we can get so caught up in the care battles that the rest isn't seen. So from peace of mind, I don't look back with any regret nor any guilt. But there are always people who will, you know, really struggle with this decision, and I can appreciate how hard that is.
And it can be a struggle, but I think there's also so many beautiful things that you can experience after you make it. Lisa, is there anything that you would like to add to today's conversation?
Oh, I would just like to just say what a privilege it is to be on the board, and just to congratulate the executive for driving this organisation to be the leader in aged care that it is, and really just to compliment Robert and his leadership team and every single person that plays a role here. You know, I always thought it was great, but I just hadn't had the experience of it being extraordinary, and there were just too many incredible people involved to name individually, but between the leadership team, Robert, the executive, the board, I just think it's a privilege, and I think that the Sydney Jewish community is extremely fortunate to have a great home as the Monty. So thank you to everybody.
No, I can only endorse that.
Thank you to both of you for your contribution. To everyone that's joined us tonight, thank you so much for taking the hour out of your evening to listen to us talk about decision making, particularly with a focus of entering and care in residential care with Montefiore. It is a complex decision around coming into care, and it's not a singular decision. It's a number of decisions that are based on individual factors that are important to you. But I do think one of the key things to know is that you're not alone. You don't have to make these decisions in isolation. We have wonderful people here at Montefiore that can support you to make decisions around what's the right type of care. Is it coming in at the beginning with Burgess Centre and having some social support, which is then added to over time with home care, and then finally coming into a residential care? Is your journey looking very different? You don't have to go through all those steps by yourself. You can reach out to us. We've got an incredible team of professionals here, and I really would just encourage you to reach out if you ever need to us. To Renée and to Lisa, thank you so much for your time this evening to share, and thank you so much for everyone's participation tonight.
Thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.